Hi there, and welcome back to another tutorial video about MailMate and really making it work for you. My name is Matt Petrowski. I'm a MailMate user and an enthusiast. In this video, we're taking a look at MailMate's settings. We're setting your settings, and this is Mail Management Refined. This is basically taking control over MailMate and making it do what you want it to do. Now, the great thing about the developer of MailMate is even if the setting doesn't necessarily show up in the preferences pane for MailMate, there typically is a setting somewhere. In fact, there are so many settings that I'm unfamiliar with that I'd have to spend probably a week just reading through all of the documentation and finding the hidden settings. Every time that the developer has released a new release, there's some type of new setting that even if it doesn't make it into the settings panel, it's something that you can control if you're willing to go into the terminal. This is power user stuff. Now we're just going to go through these as quickly as possible and just cover the ones that I'm familiar with and how they impact your use of MailMate. I have not worked with every single possible setting, and it would be up to you to figure out anything that I'm not able to fully elaborate on. Now obviously we've got our default email client. So anytime that you click on a mail to within a browser, MailMate would be used. Default downloads folder, very easy. I just leave it set to downloads. Now font settings, there's two ways to get to this. One is with the settings window right here, you can click on show fonts. And if you really get things out of whack, you can obviously click reset fonts. But a great thing about the settings in MailMate is that you get to control all of the different views of how things are presented. And just remember this, whatever is selected will be affected. That's something that I've said to myself for years using the Macintosh. So if I have in the view right here a message selected, when I bring up my fonts, that's what's going to be affected. This view of the list of all of my messages. If I have a sidebar item selected, that's what's going to be affected when I choose my fonts. Now the fonts can be accessed by going up to the Format menu and choosing Show Fonts. And that window will come up. It can also be accessible by going through this dialog and clicking Show Fonts. Same thing. But again, as I mentioned, I have a message within my message list selected. If I want to see that as Annadale Mono, no problem. Let's scroll down and choose something a little bit nicer. Maybe we'll go to Helvetica New, and we'll set that to a nice 14 point, something a little bigger. If I want the sidebar, then I'll select an item in the sidebar and then choose Helvetica New and make that maybe 12 point type. If I'm in a message view, now in this case, this particular message is an HTML message. In fact, I only have one that I know of in my message box. It's one from myself as a test message using plain text. When I click on Helvetica New here, or I need to click in the message area, I need to remember to do that, and Helvetica New, and make it, let's say, 18 point, I get to control all of the different areas of where the text is actually displayed. You may even be able to do it within the header. Nope, can't change that quite yet. But I do know there is a setting that actually controls the background color, and I believe the font size of all of the different header details, or the short list of the header details. Complete control over display is up to you, and that is actually something that isn't on a folder by folder basis, thank goodness, because when you go from one folder to the next, all of the font settings do apply. Heading back to our settings, we've got Messages folder, Index for Spotlight, Custom Locations. I really haven't messed with those. I have changed my key bindings. Submitting crash reports is always nice to send that back to the developer. If you're really into doing the experimental features, which I typically do at my own peril, I guess, I do tend to enable those, and I get the experimental or the pre-release versions instead of the stable versions. Counters, we already took a look at in a separate video. Viewer is where we get a lot of power. In fact, one of my most favorite features is the power user feature of double click. Now here you can see you've got the ability to alternate your rows if you don't like the alternating colors. You can bold for read versus unread. But this option right here to double click a message is a very key thing to know about within MailMate. It's a very ingenious feature that allows you to filter things down very quickly. You can see that you can control what it does. You can say that it either, and let's zoom out a little bit more here, it either searches for related messages or opens a message in a new window. And Shift with a double click will simply do the inverse of that. Now, I like the double click will search for related messages. The key thing here is that it really depends on what you double click. If I wanted to see everything from this particular Tumblr address and I double click, all of a sudden it filters out based on the box that I'm on. So if I'm on a filtered mailbox, let's say, for example, if I'm on flagged, it really applies to that mailbox. Now, in order to get rid of the search itself, because it's considered a search, I simply hit the escape key, and that takes it off. But we can see right here, let's select on promotional and do double click on Tumblr. You can see that it will actually apply. I have 43 messages that are shown here on my message box if I'm on the promotional mailbox. If I switch to another mailbox, which it really doesn't apply here because all messages are within my promotional and my Tumblr, but if all messages included more than one source, actually multiple mailboxes, the filter would apply based on the double click looking for that particular Tumblr address based on the folder that I select. So I can move to different folders in order to see different results. Now, if I hit the escape key and get rid of that double click search, you can see that I can double click on the subject as well. In fact, there are many items. I believe if you have other headers showing, you can double click, and based on the column that you double click, that's what the filter is going to apply for you. It's sort of like an automatic, here's a search for free. So these 5 blogs, there we go. Double click the subject, and there are the 4 messages ready for me to do whatever I want. Select all of them, preview all of them by scrolling or hitting the delete key and getting rid of them. A simple escape is going to put my view right back to what I was looking at. The same thing applies to when you do searches within MailMate, which we'll take a look at in another video. So heading back to our preferences, our viewer allows us to control how our view is. You can see that you have a theme that will be applied to plain text emails, and you can choose between any of those that are built in. But again, the developer makes it possible for you to actually create your own styled versions, because what he's doing is he's using CSS behind the scenes in order to actually apply some theming to all of your standard plain text emails. You can apply HTML to emails. You can prefer all of the plain text versions of emails if you don't like HTML. I don't even know if Tumblr is going to include that. If it doesn't, I think he's still going to show the HTML version. You can never inline PDF files, choose a minimum font, and if you don't like your messages to be marked after you select them, simply uncheck this or increase the number of seconds before MailMate considers it to be read. And finally, you can move, if you move a message to a mailbox, you can close that window after move. And that's if you've opened up the message. Now again, the double click, if you want to reverse the action, you simply just change it right here. But you can hold down the Shift key and double click, and all of those messages are going to open. You can see that they all opened and all got marked as read. So as I close all of the messages, I like the fact that I can simply just hit the return key in order to get the same effect. That works really well for me because I like to use those Gmail bindings, especially if I'm not showing my view or if I'm looking at a view without viewing the mailbox. So if I'm not organizing by thread and my layout is hiding the message view right there, if I'm on a laptop, being able to navigate with my keys, hitting the return key, reading that message or replying, closing it is a really nice way for me to do email on my laptop. So it really accommodates how you like to do your mail if you're using multiple different machines. Next biggest area that we have is the composer. I'm going to let you go through all of these different options when you're setting up your composer. We'll take a look at some of them when we actually look at the HTML markup that we can apply by using Markdown, which is a really nice feature. Signatures is a pretty standard feature. You can include signatures based on a variety of methods. Now, the key thing to remember here is that MailMate is going to be very intelligent, or attempt to be initially intelligent, about when you will reply and how you reply and what the account is used when you reply and whether or not a signature should be used. So it really starts to collect information about how you do email. That's where this item right here down at the bottom comes into play. Reset usage history. If you find that you're getting signatures that are being applied to specific email addresses that you have, or aliases, and you don't want those to be applied, this is the button that you can click in order to reset everything. Otherwise, what you can do is you can add new signatures and apply those signatures based on any addresses that you use. And again, it can be on an account by account basis or on an address by address basis. So you can put in user@domain.com, comma, email@example.com. And that's where this particular signature will actually be applied. You have a plain text version, an HTML version, and you can also apply a theme to the HTML version when that reply is going to go out. And you can, of course, give each signature a unique name. Have as many of those as you want, and they're automatically applied. So within MailMate, you can have your 5, your 8, your 10 different accounts, and the proper signature as you actually apply them to the messages will start to be remembered. There will be usage history, and eventually it's just automatic. You can reply without fear that you're going to have the signature and the wrong message. You can, of course, place it above or at the top with new lines. You can default to the bottom or the top. It depends on where you want the signature. Tags, we've already taken a look at in a separate video. Bundles is a power user feature. If you like to do editing in an external editor, or you use any of the other powerful tools that developers tend to use, more than likely, there is a bundle that will allow you to do that. For example, integration with GitHub source code, Mac Vim, which is one thing that I've used. I love to use Vim as an external editor. So it allows you to, for example, hit a key combination such as Command or Control E and edit in your external editor, save, and then that goes right back into MailMate. But as you scroll through this list, you're going to see a number of items that are very familiar to developers. We've got TextMate, Sublime, Pigments for if you do a lot of code, communicating with other developers, you can syntax highlight your code using Pigments. There's all kinds of stuff. If you're an OmniFocus user, you can automatically integrate with OmniFocus, sending an email that comes in as a task over to OmniFocus. It really is a very powerful editor in terms of being able to do things. Finally, we have security. Software update, that's going to be pretty obvious. Security is going to allow you to say what happens when messages come in. If you don't want those little 1-pixel items to actually show, then you can block your images. If the message is marked explicitly as not junk, that's when you can load things. I love the security features in that nothing will come into me except for the plain text, and anything else that everybody's including in those HTML emails, I get the benefit of the HTML without it actually loading all of the resources that are used for tracking, etc. Spam Sieve, a very powerful junk mail filtering solution. I use that, and I would highly suggest it. Rest of your security protocols, you can actually implement those. If you're using PGP, you can use that. You probably have to have that installed. They did recently update that, and it does work in, what are we looking at now? macOS Sierra is what I'm actually using right now. And you can do all of your different encryption based on what you have installed. And as I mentioned, software update, this is where you can actually say that you want to do beta builds. If you're interested in all of the latest and greatest of what the developer has, choose your beta builds and you're good to go. You can also ask before downloading updates, and you can include anonymous usage information. I like to give that to developer, and you've got your ability to check. And those are all of your settings that you have in order to take advantage. And remember, there are hidden settings that are available within MailMate. If you ever want to see those, just take a quick trip to the release notes And you're going to see as you scroll through this, which is a super long document, anytime where you see default or or defaults write com freron MailMate, use old toolbar. These are commands that you're going to be able to put into the terminal if you want to control this particular setting, because it's a setting that's available, but it's not within the settings preferences panel. It's something that you need to set in order to actually have that setting. But you will find that throughout all of this documentation, you'll find a lot of as a prefix to all of the custom settings that are hidden behind the scenes in MailMate. It is a highly, highly extensible email tool.